Do you ever feel like you've mastered air travel only to be completely blindsided by something unexpected? That's precisely what occurred to me on three separate occasions over the last 6 months, leading me to understand that the airport journey is subtly shifting in ways that can surprise even seasoned globetrotters. I'm not referring to major transformations or elaborate theories, but rather practical adjustments that airports and airlines have progressively implemented, which can affect your journey if you're not informed. Some of these discoveries came without much trouble. Others, well, let's just say I wish I had been forewarned. The truth is, these alterations aren't inherently negative. A few are actually beneficial. However, when a man is hurrying through an airport with a tight transfer or striving to reach a crucial appointment, any unforeseen event can disrupt his entire travel flow. And as frequent flyers, we often fall into a routine, performing tasks exactly as we always have. Here are 7 modifications I've recently come across that are worth being aware of. They're not groundbreaking, but they offer the kind of heads up that can spare you delays, bewilderment, or unforeseen charges. My first revelation: the enigma of solo booking prices. This particular situation took me completely aback when I was arranging a spontaneous business journey to Chicago. I accessed the airline's website, entered my information for a single traveler, and noted the cost. Subsequently, purely out of intrigue, I adjusted the number to 2 passengers, hoping to discover if there were any discounts for flying with a companion. The individual fare decreased by nearly $40. It was the identical flight, date, and everything else, except I was now reserving for 2 instead of 1. Believing it to be a system error, I contacted the airline. It appears that certain carriers have been trialing what they term accompanied travel pricing. Essentially, if a man reserves several seats simultaneously, even if the passengers won't be seated next to each other, he might secure a reduced rate per individual. The customer service representative couldn't truly clarify the reasoning, mentioning something about group booking algorithms and seat inventory management. When I inquired if I could book 2 seats and simply not utilize one, she informed me that was impermissible. Thus, flying solo can occasionally be more expensive, and there's little a man can directly do about it. Here's my refined strategy. Always verify the cost for 2 passengers, even if I'm traveling alone. Should there be a substantial disparity, I might consider asking a friend or relative if they have any upcoming travel plans to the same locale. We could book jointly and potentially both save funds. I've also observed that this phenomenon occurs more frequently on shorter domestic routes compared to longer international journeys. Furthermore, the price gap seems most pronounced during off-peak periods when airlines are endeavoring to fill empty seats. It's peculiar, yet it's evidently a current practice. At a minimum, being aware of it means a man won't be as astonished as I was, and he might even discover a method to exploit it to his benefit. My second discovery concerns power banks. I became aware of this during a flight heading to Seattle, when a flight attendant courteously requested that I relocate my power bank from the overhead compartment to a location where it was visible. I initially assumed I had committed an error, but she clarified that new directives require charging devices to be kept in plain sight during the flight. Apparently, a safety occurrence earlier this year involved a power bank becoming excessively hot, and consequently, many airlines now prefer these devices remain visible, either within the seat back pocket, on the tray table, or stowed in one's personal item beneath the seat ahead. The flight attendant was remarkably pleasant about it and elaborated that if any device begins to heat up or malfunction, they must be able to quickly identify and address the issue. This perspective makes complete sense. She noted that there have been several occasions where travelers had to be asked to disconnect devices that were warming up. Nowadays, I consistently pack my power bank in my personal item rather than in my carry-on bag destined for the overhead bin. This approach is actually more practical, as I can access it readily when required, and I avoid any in-flight requests to rearrange my belongings. The other lesson I absorbed is to never leave power banks plugged in and charging unsupervised, particularly overnight in hotel accommodations. It's a sound general habit that has gained even greater significance now. The third insight: smart luggage is becoming intricate. My brother-in-law experienced this firsthand the hard way when the TSA prohibited him from bringing his new smart suitcase onto the plane. It featured an integrated battery for device charging, GPS tracking, digital locking mechanisms, the full suite of advanced functionalities. He was quite enthusiastic about it, having invested a significant sum in what he believed represented the future of travel equipment. The issue, however, was that the battery was non-removable. The TSA's regulation is quite explicit. If your luggage contains a lithium battery that cannot be extracted, it is not permitted to fly, neither in the cabin nor as checked baggage. The reasoning is that if a battery overheats in the cargo compartment, no one can access it to resolve the problem. What exacerbated the situation was that he only discovered this upon arriving at the airport for a family holiday. He was ultimately forced to abandon the suitcase and purchase a standard one at the airport store, an outcome that was both costly and distressing. If a man's smart luggage does possess a removable battery, he can indeed travel with it. But the battery itself must be transported in his carry-on bag, adequately protected with its terminals insulated. Moreover, its capacity must not exceed 160 watt-hours, which disqualifies some of the more robust alternatives. He must also be prepared to demonstrate to TSA agents how to remove the battery if requested. In principle, I find smart luggage appealing, and some of its functionalities are genuinely practical. But after witnessing my brother-in-law's ordeal, I am opting for conventional luggage for the foreseeable future. If a man already owns smart luggage, he should simply verify that the battery is removable, that he knows how to quickly extract it, and that he is aware of the watt-hour rating before proceeding to the airport. Another factor to consider is that smart luggage tends to be heavier even without the battery, thereby consuming a larger portion of one's weight allowance before he even begins packing. My fourth observation: certain airports are adopting a silent approach. I was seated at my gate, engrossed in reading, when it dawned on me that I hadn't heard any announcements for more than an hour. No boarding calls, no gate alterations, absolutely nothing. Initially, I suspected a technical malfunction with the speakers. Upon inquiring at the information desk, they elucidated that they are piloting quiet terminal initiatives in specific areas. All pertinent information is instead displayed on screens and disseminated via the airline application, with loudspeaker announcements reserved exclusively for genuine emergencies. On one hand, it's remarkably tranquil. A man can engage in a phone conversation without contending with ceaseless vocal notifications, and the entire terminal exudes a more serene ambiance. Conversely, if one isn't diligently monitoring his phone or the departure displays, he risks overlooking crucial updates regarding his flight. I discussed this with several fellow travelers, and opinions were quite divided. Some individuals appreciated the hushed setting, particularly if they were attempting to work or rest during an extended layover. Others felt apprehensive about the prospect of missing vital details, especially older travelers who were less accustomed to relying on their mobile devices for updates. I have since become considerably more diligent about checking the airline app and frequently glancing at the departure screens when I am in these silent areas. I also ensure that my phone notifications for flight updates are activated, and I maintain an audible volume so I don't overlook anything. The crucial aspect is simply knowing which airports or terminals have implemented this policy, so a man can adapt his routine accordingly. It's truly not a significant adjustment once one habituates to it, but it certainly feels distinct if he is accustomed to hearing every detail announced. My fifth realization: the Real ID practical test. Despite the Real ID being a subject of discussion for years, I continue to observe individuals being caught off guard by it at security checkpoints. Only last month, I witnessed a person in front of me in line being directed aside because his driver's license lacked the distinctive gold star in the upper right corner. The TSA agent handled the situation professionally, but essentially clarified that a standard driver's license is no longer sufficient for domestic flights. One now requires either a Real ID compliant license, a passport, or another government-approved form of identification such as a military ID or a permanent resident card. What truly astonished me was the protracted duration of the entire procedure. It wasn't merely a swift denial of passage. There were documents to complete, inquiries to address, and supplementary screening protocols. I believe the individual ultimately missed his flight, despite arriving early, because the alternative verification process consumed almost an hour. The exasperating aspect for travelers is that certain states were tardier in issuing Real ID licenses. Consequently, individuals who believed they were prepared discovered their recently acquired license from 2 years prior was still non-compliant, and securing an appointment at the Department of Motor Vehicles to upgrade can demand weeks in some regions. If a man hasn't examined his license recently, it's advisable to retrieve it and inspect for that gold star or Real ID designation. Should it be absent, he might consider either upgrading his license or simply traveling with his passport. I've actually begun carrying my passport for domestic flights, because it generally facilitates a swifter passage through security anyway, and there's never any ambiguity regarding its acceptance. Another point to bear in mind is that this regulation applies to anyone aged 18 and above. Therefore, if a man is traveling with older teenagers, they too will require compliant identification. This has surprised some families who presumed their teens' regular licenses would suffice. My sixth observation: AI scanners are exceptionally meticulous. I encountered this personally at Denver International Airport, which is equipped with some of the latest AI-driven CT scanners. The favorable aspect is that a man no longer needs to remove his laptop or his bag of liquids, which significantly expedites and simplifies the initial process of preparing his bins. The less favorable news is that these scanners detect every single detail. My bag was flagged for what ultimately proved to be a granola bar, not due to any inherent danger, but because the AI identified its density pattern as warranting closer inspection. The TSA agent was quite congenial about it, and explained that the new scanners possess extraordinary sensitivity and occasionally flag items that the older equipment would have overlooked. What's intriguing is that the AI continually learns. Thus, certain frequently flagged items will eventually be recognized as innocuous. However, for now, objects such as multi-layered snacks, shoes with thick soles, and even specific electronic cables are more prone to requiring a secondary examination. I've also heard from fellow travelers that the consistency can be peculiar. The identical item might pass through one of these scanners at a particular airport without issue, yet be flagged at another, depending on the AI's specific training at that site. The crucial point is simply not to feel personally targeted if a man's bag is selected for supplementary screening. It doesn't imply he has done anything improper. The technology is merely more exact, which translates to increased thoroughness. I actually consider it to be generally safer, even if it occasionally entails a lengthier wait. My recommendation is to pack items that might confuse the scanner, such as dense food items or electronics with numerous cables, in easily accessible locations, so they can be swiftly removed if necessary. And simply allocate a bit of additional time for security at airports that, as a man knows, utilize these more modern machines. My seventh revelation: new passenger rights are genuinely beneficial. This particular modification is unequivocally to our advantage. Having contended with airline delays and cancellations for years with scant recourse, there are finally concrete protections implemented that possess actual substance. I uncovered this when my flight bound for Denver was postponed by 4 hours owing to maintenance problems. Previously, such an event would have entailed numerous apologetic announcements, perhaps a modest snack voucher, and essentially enduring the wait. Instead, I automatically received a complete refund credited back to my card within 7 days. Not a voucher for subsequent travel, but genuine monetary reimbursement. The updated Department of Transportation regulations are quite explicit. If a man's domestic flight is delayed by over 3 hours, or 6 hours for international travel, he is entitled to a full refund, not merely future credit. Should he be involuntarily removed from an overbooked flight, the compensation can amount to as much as $2,150 in cash, contingent on his delayed arrival time at his destination. What truly impressed me was that I wasn't obliged to contend for it or complete a multitude of forms. The airline proactively dispatched an email detailing my alternatives and automatically processed the refund when I opted for that over rebooking. Airlines are also now mandated to furnish authentic human customer service around the clock, rather than exclusively automated systems or outsourced call centers with restricted authority. Furthermore, if a man is stranded on the tarmac for more than 2 hours, they are required to supply food and water. Beyond 3 hours, he possesses the right to disembark the aircraft, unless a valid safety imperative dictates otherwise. These regulations also encompass aspects like damaged or delayed luggage, with compensation extending up to $4,700 for lost bags. In the case of a mobility aid like a wheelchair, there is no cap on compensation. While I never wish to encounter delays and cancellations, it's reassuring to recognize that tangible rules now safeguard passengers, rather than simply relying on an airline's goodwill. And the fact that these provisions apply to any flight touching U.S. soil signifies a man is covered even when flying with international carriers. Those are the 7 shifts I've observed in my recent journeys. Most of them are quite simple for a man to adjust to once he's aware of them, and some, such as the updated passenger rights, genuinely represent enhancements. The main thing is simply remaining cognizant that air travel continues to transform, and what was effective last year might not hold true this year. The positive aspect is that none of these modifications are intended to complicate travel. They typically pertain to safety, operational effectiveness, or traveler safeguarding. However, like any alteration, they can surprise a man if he isn't anticipating them. My current general strategy is to always consult airline websites for any revised information before I embark on a trip, particularly if some time has passed since my previous journey. I also endeavor to incorporate a bit of additional time into my airport routine, because a man can never predict when he'll encounter something novel that requires a few extra minutes to navigate. Which of these transformations surprised you the most? Have you faced any of these scenarios during your travels? Or have you noticed other changes in how airports and airlines function? Please leave a comment below. I review every single one and greatly appreciate hearing about the experiences of fellow travelers. If you found this content valuable, kindly press that like button and subscribe to Journey Tips for more useful travel advice of this nature. Share this with anyone who frequently travels. These sorts of advance warnings can genuinely protect someone from unforeseen issues. Thank you immensely for watching. Safe travels, and I'll see you on the next Journey Tips.